You're listening to Dodge Movie Podcast. Your hosts are Christy and Mike Dodge, the founders of Dodge Media Productions. We produce films and podcasts, so this is a podcast about films. Join them as they share their passion for filmmaking.
All right, welcome back, everybody, to this episode of Dodge Movie Podcast, where we are talking about probably one of my top 10 favorite movies. Everyone in my family loves this movie. It's a fun one. It was filmed here in Oregon, which gives me a lot of pride. It is the 1987 version, Gary Marshall's version of Overboard, starring Goldie Hawn, Kurt Russell, Edward Herrmann, yay, Mr. Gilmore, Roddy McDowall, and Hector Elizondo has a little credit that I didn't remember seeing him in this. Roddy actually is one of the executive producers. It was filmed here in Oregon, like I said, in Newport. It was also filmed partially in California, Fort Bragg, Mendocino, Marina del Rey. The writer is Leslie Dixon, and it's a movie about a cruel but beautiful heiress who mocks and cheats a hired carpenter. When she gets amnesia after an accident, he decides to introduce her to the regular life by convincing her that they are husband and wife. The two taglines are from opulence to rags to love, and she was born to spend, he was born to offend, and there's only one way they could fall in love by accident. So before I launch Mike into the pickup line, I have to add this because I thought it was hilarious. We've talked before kind of these movies that we watched when we were younger, and then now in our older, maybe more woke or at least more aware. We sat down to watch this film, and our youngest walked through, who's 20, and he goes, "What are you guys watching?" And I said, "Overboard." And he said, "Is this the one where she falls off the boat and he gaslights her for the whole film?" And I just thought, oh my gosh, nice way to take one of my favorite movies and turn it into.
But she's happier at the end of the film. It works out well. So
yeah, it's a romantic comedy, right? It follows all.
I would say it is a classic romantic comedy, and it has a little bit of a nice twist, which Oregon films do have a thing of doing, of playing with the gender roles, right? Because you could argue that Goldie Hawn has at least as much of a transformation as Kurt Russell's character.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I just thought everybody would enjoy that from the mouths of babes, as they say.
Right.
But Mike, why don't you kick us off and tell us what the pickup line of this film is?
Doc 5, the Immaculata.
What is that in reference to?
So the character of Dean, who
Yes.
is played by Kurt Russell, is a carpenter. And he's asking for directions to the boat, which is owned by Joanna, played by Goldie Hawn. And
Yes.
it is the Immaculata.
So Joanna Staten, we see her, and they are giving us all of, well, first of all, she's always in these like slinky, I would say, she's always in these very impractical bathing suits, like ones, well, first of all, they were all French cut. Thank you, 1987.
Yeah.
So they all went up her butt. They were just like, if you even probably raised your arms over your head, they would like pop. Like they just were impractical. They were mostly just for sunning yourself, not actually swimming. So she's always in these type of bathing suits. Her hair is always coiffed. She has these giant hats on. She's got the big jewelry, like once again, not really bathing, like swimming suit, I guess more sunbathing suit.
Ooh, she was Real Housewives before there was a Real Housewives.
Right? And she's just exhibiting her wealth. Like there is scene after scene after scene about just disgusting wealth. Like she's wasting all kinds of stuff. And she's technically just being a horrible person.
Really, she calls in Dean the carpenter because she wants some cabinetry for organizing her shoes. And I have to say, Gary was moving the plot along. But boy, that guy is able to, in a few short hours, do what I think would take an actual carpenter in their own shop days.
Right.
And there with one toolbox, he's able to put together a pretty sophisticated closet organizer.
Yes, yes. So she, like Mike said, she hires him to remodel this closet. And he does, but not to her liking. He didn't use cedar. He used oak, which I thought was a good nod to Oregon because we're kind of known for our oak trees, right?
I have no idea. I think,
okay, pine.
Maybe Doug fir.
Okay, true enough. So he doesn't use the right materials, and he does it in a sophisticated, like Mike said, but maybe not as fancy as she would have liked it. And so she says she's not paying him, but being a working class guy, he can absorb the cost of all the materials.
Well, we also discover he's a widower with 4 young children.
Right. And so he at least needs to be compensated for the wood. And she isn't having it. She's not going to comply. And so there's a moment where he takes off his tool belt, and she thinks he's going to like make advances at her, or possibly even rape her, which he isn't. He's just, I don't know why he took off his tool belt.
I think he was saying he's not going to work until she pays him.
Oh, okay. And then he kind of takes his eye off her, and she uses it as an opportunity to push him overboard. And then she throws his tool belt and his tools, which is horrible because I know those tool belts are made with leather, and that ocean water.
Oh, yeah, it would ruin everything.
Oh, and
then, they would sink immediately.
Right. I know. I love it. You see the toolbox, and it's just like bobbing along.
Which was the guys in the set department didn't want to have to make several of them, so they made sure it floated. Yeah. But that's at least a trio of misdemeanors, right? There's assault and battery. There's aspiratation. There's a lot going on there. She really should be careful.
Right. So he's pissed, and he just collects his tools, and he goes back home. And I don't think we don't see his home life, but we see her call her mom. And once again, this is another kind of show don't tell. I should have mentioned when I talked about who's in it, Katherine Hellman plays her mother, and her dog's name is Shiitake. And Joanna asks her mom, should I have a baby? I just don't know if I should have a baby or not. And she says, but Joanna, if you have a baby, you won't be the baby. So once again, like just showing us how spoiled Joanna is.
Right.
And her mom has created this, right? Because we see her mother's life is very similar, and she's just fostering this horrible attitude that Joanna has. So, we do see his home, because when he gets home, the school teacher runs out, and she's covered with TP. And he says something really funny, like, it looks like you had a bad night at Halloween or something. And the dogs are attacking her. And as she has been criticizing his children and his home life, he kind of shouts back, which I thought was interesting. I am a good father, which I thought kind of set up a little bit of then Act 2, that he wants to be a good dad. He just is struggling ever since the death of his wife.
But I think it's with the principal, but I know it's early in Act 1 there, they establish, someone says, oh, these children have no rules. Mm-hmm. And he says, yeah, I know, I'm a good father.
Right.
So it shows that he wants to be a good father, but he doesn't know. He's ignorant or incorrect.
Right. So this is when we see Hector Elizondo. And all the times I have watched this film, I never caught this. And I'm embarrassed.
That it was Hector Elizondo?
Yes. Oh, well, before we see Hector, she forgets her wedding ring, and she goes out and she stumbles in trying to retrieve her wedding ring and falls overboard. Thus the name of the film. And so then we see Hector. He's found her. He's the Portuguese fisherman that has found her, which I love. For those of you who don't know, I'm a quarter Portuguese, and I thought it was fun that not only do we hear that Hector is the Portuguese fisherman right here, but at the end, there's a very beautiful story of a Portuguese story of two people. I'll save that for later.
Now, speaking of falling overboard, I must interject that a friend of mine was in the United States Navy and says when they're out at sea, if someone goes overboard and they lose sight of them, they won't even turn around because you'll never find them again.
Well, that's what happens here. They don't even know that she's gone off.
Which is apparently the realistic. They lost sight of her, so no one would be able to. You can't find a person in the ocean, apparently. The ocean's very big and people are small.
Right. So next morning, the local news is talking about this woman. They're asking for help because she has amnesia. She doesn't know who she is. They're asking the local people to help out. And so Dean sees her on TV, and when he hears that she doesn't remember, he has an idea. And so his friend, as he's leaving, says, Dean, don't do this. So his friend knows him enough to kind of have an idea of what he's up to. So he goes to the hospital and convinces them, because of the skimpy bathing suits, he saw that she has a birthmark on her, I think it was her left butt cheek, that was like in the shape of a strawberry.
Right. So that birthmark could have been put several places, but Gary Marshall is a smart director, and he says, we're going to put that on Goldie Hawn's butt cheek.
High up, so that she has to wear those French cut, like thong bathing
And it's an
suits.
excuse for the camera crew to get lots of footage of the hiney.
Yeah. And so they said, well, do you have any way you can identify her? And he says, well, she has this birthmark. So then they show her going behind the TV to look, and she's just disgusted that she has this birthmark because it means she has to go with this heathen.
This is another 80s trope, because I remember seeing this on sitcoms where this was classic, the hidden birthmark. This was a lot of birthmarks in the 80s.
Birthmark humor went out with hammock and seltzer humor.
I know. Boy, we got to bring that back.
And souffle humor.
I don't know if souffle humor made it to the 80s. It was more the 50s.
It went out with the clafouti.
Yeah. Oh, points for the callback.
So I love, just kind of, it's funny. A funny gag is he's got the hound dog up in the cab of the truck and she's in the back wearing the jumper that says like Elk Cove waist.
Right. Which was similar to the one worn by Hector Elizondo.
Right. So, and she even eats a bug. And when they get to his house, she says, we moved here deliberately. So I like it. It very much, I noticed here in this opening scene where we're seeing his house as he's giving her a tour. And the house is just, war torn, it almost looks like. And they walk into this one room. The kids kind of come running down the stairs and they walk into this room, and the air popper is just, it doesn't have like the chute on the top that would normally direct the popcorn into the bowl. And so popcorn is just going straight up into the air. And what I love is it was almost like when they came into the room, the popper went on, and then he kind of yells at the boys and goes, hey, and the popper magically turns off.
Well, it would run out of popcorn.
Of popcorn. But you don't even hear the fan. Like I've had that kind of air popper.
Yeah,
I know how they
I think
work.
we all did.
Right. So the kids are just, running amok, and they went and bought her dresses, but they're way, way, way too big. And I love it. Totally 80s. The youngest thinks he's Pee Wee Herman, so he talks in that kind of
Pee Wee Herman voice.
Right.
The trivia from IMDb said that was not scripted. That was an improv acting choice by that young actor.
Oh.
And Gary just went with it. Now,
I love that.
I didn't look this up, but my guess is this movie thus came out before Pee Wee Herman's Big Adventure in the movie theater that we got to know him for, because I don't know they would have left it in after that incident.
Ah, so you think it was just a TV show at that time?
Well, I don't know if you remember, but Paul Rubens had a little incident.
Right. I do recall.
And I'm assuming this
But
is
that
before
happened
that.
later. That happened later.
Yeah, it must have.
Okay.
But
Look
I thought that
We're
was
not going to talk about it here.
amazing that a young actor like that would have made that acting choice.
It was just goofing. I don't think it was like an acting choice.
Okay. I was going to give him a little credit. He was just goofing off,
Sorry,
and
he
Gary
looked like
said,
he was
go
8.
with it.
I think he was just being silly. Sorry. I'm bursting all kinds
I
of
know,
bubbles.
right?
Here. The other thing I don't think I ever really caught is there's a scene where she's trying to cook a chicken, and I love it because it still has like the feet on it. I mean, it totally looks like the gag chicken kind of, with the head and the feet, I think, on it. And so she's trying to cram it in this pot. And so it's, there's some comedy there. But if you listen, the kids are giving the exposition because Dean's dream is to create this golf course
Right.
for the Elk Cove. And he had already mentioned, I believe it was to the teacher who was there, who said that he didn't have a safe house. And he goes, no, I've got 2 fire extinguishers poised in the kitchen. Right. And so she burns herself because she doesn't realize it's a gas stove. And so when she tries to light the...
Oh, I don't think she's ever cooked.
Oh, that's true. That's very, very true. So once again, show don't tell, right? We just see she's out of her element. So then when she goes to light it, it goes way up. She burns herself. And the boys, I think part being mischievous and part, just taking the opportunity to kind of rib her even more, go and get the 2 fire extinguishers and just douse her with foam.
I would say it's just an opportunity to use a fire extinguisher.
Right.
When you're 9 or 10, that's awesome.
So he leaves to go bowling. Now, this, I guess by the premise, by the bit, don't take things too seriously. But I was like, you've just met this woman and you're going to leave your children with her. And I know he's trying to teach her a lesson and take advantage of her and some free babysitting. But I was like, but she could just up and leave. She could remember, hey, I'm not this person. I'm Joanna, Statham or whatever. Staten. And she just leaves. And so I was just like, that's brave.
Yeah. Again, I do think this is a by the premise, by the bit kind of situation. But would you maybe he was thinking, would you believe that he was thinking that she would buy the story that they're her kids, so that's why she wouldn't leave.
She wouldn't leave. Yeah, that's what I think is happening. But I just thought, I guess watching it for so many times, I was finally questioning, like, oh my God, he just left his kids with a perfect stranger. So his friend, when he goes out bowling, and his friend asks him, are you gonna have sex with her? And he says, no, but I am gonna have some fun with her. And so it was just like, whew, what's that mean?
Yeah. He douses himself with cheap whiskey to convince her that he's drunk. Mm-hmm. And he keeps referring to no boom boom.
And she is just appalled by this life that she lives.
But here's where, again, from the department of couldn't be made today, I think the idea of him proposing some sort of sexual interaction with a woman that he doesn't really even know. I think your modern viewer might have more of a problem with that than we did in 87.
That, and I don't think you could say this today, as he goes out the second day off to work, he sings, zippity-doo-dah, zippity-yay. My, oh my, I have a wonderful slave.
Oh, didn't catch that.
Can't do that.
Probably not.
Nope. So a little ditty that I had no idea was an earworm. Yeah. There's a song that plays while there was a montage of her cleaning up the house. And the tune is Jim Dandy to the Rescue. And it comes up later, too. And I believe it's the song that plays over the credits.
Well, was that played by the Mullet Band in the bar?
Yes. But here it's in a montage. She uses like the vacuum to pick up cereal from the table. It just shows how she's not very good in the ways of domestic life. She puts way too much soap in the washing machine, which kind of almost like comes alive and walks towards her.
That's another one along with souffle humor.
Totally.
Too much soap in the washing machine humor.
I think that happened in Mr. Mom.
I think it happened in I Love Lucy as well.
Mm-hmm. She is using a chainsaw and it completely gets out of control. She cuts off the head of the scarecrow. She cuts the wash line or the drying line.
Right. Which again is a funny gag, but chainsaws aren't that hard to control.
Right.
And if you let go of them, the throttle goes back to idle. Anyway.
It's very silly. She's using Pledge to clean the windows, which Pledge is an oil base. It's probably the last thing you want to use to clean windows.
But
she
the little
steps
woman
on
doesn't
gum.
know. Yeah,
she steps on. And so After working all day long, cut to, he comes home. The kids are throwing grapes at her while she sits catatonic in a chair. And one of the little boys, I think Joe, the one that liked Pee Wee Herman, says, I liked it when she said, bubba, 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 which is my mother's, one of her favorite parts of this movie. So, they're just running this poor lady ragged.
Okay. When I look at this and Splash, we had a lot of pushing blonde ladies into the water in the 80s.
So they go into the closet. I can't remember what. There was something she had a question. And so he takes her into the closet and he's pointing at the closet. And he had this habit of he would take his tank top, which he had kind of cut the sides out, and he would run his hands up and down the tank top. And when he does it and he's standing by a closet for a split second, she remembers when she was in her yacht and he was running his hands up and down the tank top. And she goes, wait, I remember this. And so he kind of panics because he thinks maybe she's getting her memory back. And so he sneaks out with some photos to take to his friend Billy, who used to make fake IDs, for him to forge basically a history with this woman. Meanwhile, we see that Grant is down in LA with a yacht in the company of 3 women, including Tofurky Klein.
Right, which I made a note in my notes as Tofurky, but I think that's a slightly different thing.
I think that's a different thing. And then we see him back taking advantage. His friend Billy comes over and he says, Sugar Lips, I think our guest needs another beer. And then the kids play a practical joke on her by putting super glue on the plates. And so she goes to pick up the plates to serve the banana cream pie. And in this scene, I noticed, to your interest in costume design, her clothes start to change a little bit. Like, she isn't just wearing the big, huge outfits that the kids bought for her, but it's almost like she's tailor-made some clothes, and she's looking a little bit more like she's putting an interest in making what she's got, the stuff around her, she's making it work more for her.
Yes, and this is in the category of by the premise, by the bit. I'm not sure somebody who didn't have a history with sewing would be able to take in those clothes and zhuzh them up quite so effectively.
Right, but I just noticed, like, she takes a t-shirt and it's tied by her waist. So she's not looking so downtrodden. She's trying to...
She's looking cute.
Yeah, she's looking cuter. And the house is too. If you notice over the course of the film, the house looked like a complete war zone at the beginning. And as the movie goes on, you know, the curtains are pulled back with a cute little bow. And she is feminizing the house.
Yes, in kind of like, though, a 50s kind of way, which matches with the narrative that Dean has given her, right? That, oh, you're just the little woman who's going to take care of the kids and bring me and my buddy beers, right? There's a point where they're watching football and like, oh, well, we're out of beer. Well, then Sweet Lips is going to have to go to the store and get more. He's very much that stereotypical kind of approach to gender roles in the relationship.
Well, and I wonder if that's why Gary, or the Leslie Dixon, the screenwriter, wrote the part at the beginning where she asks her mom, should I have a baby? So we get that character thinking, do I want to be more domestic, or do I just want to have people cater to me?
Put that in play.
Right.
Right. It really sets up the last line of the film.
Yeah. Don't skip ahead.
I was foreshadowing.
Okay. So she gets so mad, and she kind of has a breaking point when they glue her hands to the plates. She lets them have it, and all these things that she's been holding in, and she's been trying to make it work, but she's kind of like, I'm no longer going to be your guys' punching bag. I'm not going to be your source of entertainment. I'm not going to take any more. And so she sprays them all down with the hose, and they end up laughing, and her and the kids run outside and they roll around with what we find out later was poison ivy. And then a scene that I absolutely love is she gets called to the school, and she comes in, and the teacher is being very, very mean. And she's saying, your children are unruly and they're not paying attention and they're not taking the test. And she gets angry at the woman because she's like, well, they're not paying attention because they're all itchy from head to toe. Did you not notice that these children, and she very much turns into a parent. And in her mind, she is their parent, but us knowing that she's not, I think who wouldn't want someone to stand up for you? And when in that moment, when she stands up for those 4 boys and takes their side and just kind of, and you even, I think there is a scene where they cut to the boys and they're watching her take up for them against this mean teacher. And they're like, oh, wow, I really like her.
And Dean, their dad, is standing outside the doorway out of sight, listening to this interaction. So that's his opportunity to kind of see that perhaps she has surpassed him in the parenting competition.
Yes. And I think, don't you think a little bit of him right there? It's almost like he's starting to realize maybe she's good for us. Or at least his heart is maybe softening to her as a person rather than trying to take advantage of her.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. He's already by this time beginning to fall for her.
Yes. And she says, tell me something nice. Because up until that point, it was all just like how she was a slut and how she dated his friend Billy. And it was just like she had a bad back, so she had to sleep on the couch. It was all this bad stuff. And she goes, can you tell me something nice? And so he totally makes up this story about her saving a little boy's life. And there's a sweet little melody that kind of, comes in. And that's when you see, I think, him starting to soften towards her because he is trying to actually care about her feelings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And he has, of course, this tension between should he tell her or not. The whole point of this, right, is eventually the gig is going to be up. And he was originally thinking it would just be for a few weeks.
Yeah.
And he worked out the number of days of her being his domestic servant that would be necessary to make up for what she owed him.
Right.
And I think it's like a month or a little bit less than that. So he knows this is naturally going to end. And the question is, when is he going to tell her?
Right.
Knowing that now he has feelings for her. He sees her as a person. She's going to be angry and won't want to talk to him anymore.
Right. So they go out to play volleyball and have a picnic with Billy and his girlfriend or wife. I can't remember.
No, it's a girlfriend. Gertie's girlfriend.
And you notice that she's being a lot more accommodating. She's being a little bit more like hospitality, not so pretentious. But as they're talking about one of the ideas for the mini golf course, she says, what about the 7 wonders of the world? And she starts speaking French. And she's like, how do I know how to speak French? And he says, and she says, was it when I was in the Navy?
Right.
And he jumps on that. Yeah. It's when you were in the Navy. So Billy asks him if he's weakening at all. But he says, no, but I can't tell her yet. But that's when I think I noticed that the house is looking nicer. The kids are doing better. She's reading to the kids. It's just, she's in more of a maternal role. So I think she questions him about something. And so to distract her, he says, let's go out. It's our anniversary. Or was it her?
It's her birthday.
It was her birthday.
Yeah.
So he says, let's go out. So they go to the bar, and that's when we see the band, and they play Jim Dandy again.
I want to say mullets on parade. That was, woof.
And if you look in one scene, the drummer is Gary Marshall.
The director.
Yes. So after dancing, they go outside, and it's as beautiful as everyone who enjoys the Oregon coast knows. It's just a beautiful, like, summer night on the coast. And he tells her the legend of Catarina and Arturo, where Arturo was on a fishing boat, and he went out and, because they couldn't be together. I think their families didn't want them to be together. Because that's what it was. I'm sorry, you guys. Watch the movie to get the real story. But there's the foghorn, and he says, that's Arturo yelling for Catarina. And so he would yell Catarina, Catarina. And she would yell back, Arturo, Arturo. And then they would both jump into the water and they met under the sea. And that's where they are spending time together. And every time you see a big splash, I think she says it's them making love. And so then Dean and Annie, who is the name that he gave her, they go home and they make love.
Waka waka. There's a line in here. So obviously the viewer can notice that Goldie Hawn is a smaller bust line individual, and to her credit has not resorted to giant enhancements. But there's a line where the oldest boy, who is shown to be looking at Playboy magazines, a little racy for Gary,
right?
Has a line in there, she might have no tits, but she's got a nice ass. And I thought, wow, there's a little more sexual innuendo in this film than I remember or that I would associate with a Gary Marshall film. So, like, when she said they're making love she didn't say kissing with the story. I thought that was, Gary was getting a little edgier with this film, maybe.
Mm-hmm. So this is probably the beginning of the third act. We see her mother call Grant and ask to talk to Joanna. And he says he's being very elusive because he doesn't want to admit that she's been thrown off the boat. And so she says, let me talk to her or I'm coming out there. And so he orders the captain to turn the boat back to Elk Snout, as he calls it, instead of Elk Cove. And so that sets up that kind of things are ramping up. So they're headed to the opening of the golf course, and she's cleaning out the truck. Him and Billy have just gone pheasant shooting, and so she's wiping feathers, and she opens the glove box and finds panties that the hospital gave him. And she sees that on the panties they say JS, so she thinks he's having an affair. So he knows that the gig is up, and he tells her, okay, this is what happened. And she goes and asks the kids, and the kids go, no, you're our mom, because they like having her there. And so they don't want her to leave. And so then she goes to Billy, and Billy also kind of stands up for him and says, no.
Yeah, he comes up with this story that it's actually him and that he wrote a personal check to a phone sex operator to have interactions with her in person. Again, Gary, a little edgy with this one. Again, by the premise, by the bit, I had a hard time thinking that Dean would keep the panties in his glove box. Right?
Don't you think he probably just put him in there that night it happened and just forgot about him?
No, I don't think a straight male would forget about women's panties.
Okay.
So I also think he would have easily thought of they're a previous girlfriend or something. They were there when I bought the truck. I never looked. There's a ton of excuses, but it sets up that bit.
How she finds, yeah.
Right. And Billy is a really good buddy. In order to protect his friend, admits to having a prostitute. It's a deep commitment to his buddy's friendship there.
Right. So she doesn't believe him. So they go to the opening of the mini golf course, which is really fun. Like Mike even said, I wish this really existed because it's got all these, plus especially it's such a coastal, like kind of rinky-dink, but kind of cute at the same time, little display of all the seven wonders. And one of them being Mount St. Helens. So that's kind of fun for a little local pride. He proposes to her on the grandstand. He says, I couldn't have done this without you. They kiss. And then we see the yacht pulling back into the harbor just as he puts the ring on her finger. So they're happy, right? So they go home after the ceremony, and she's walking into the house with the flowers, and she's so happy because she's got her cute little family with these 4 boys, and she sees her real husband, Grant, and she walks by and she says, oh, hi, Grant. How you doing? And she walks into the house and comes back out and goes, wait, how do I know you? And then that's when magically, as amnesia goes in all of these films, she gets all of her memory back. And then all of a sudden she goes, wait, I'm rich. I have money.
Okay, another thing from the 80s is amnesia.
Yes, absolutely. Well, they do set it up. They say she has temporary amnesia. And the doctor does say, I think, like, suddenly you'll get it back.
while you were sleeping? I don't know. It just seems like this was a common trope.
Yeah.
How do we establish that this character doesn't know anything that's important? Well, we'll give them a head trauma
And so she feels very betrayed by Dean because she realizes, oh, shoot, everything he told me is true. So she doesn't, I'm sure that if that happened in real life, which just is pretty farcical, but it would be like, I don't even know what to believe anymore. And so she just gets in the limo because that's, I guess, what she does know. And as she pulls away, like a total knife to the heart, the little boy says, the littlest Joe says, "You said moms don't leave," and very sad music plays.
Yeah. Wah, wah.
Oh, it's so sad. How could this movie ever return?
Right.
So she gets back on the boat and now she's a different person. She wants a beer rather than like champagne. She's dressed nicely and obviously in her finer outfits, but her hair isn't as coiffed.
But more importantly, she's down in the galley partying with the crew.
Yes. And
teaching him how to do tequila shots. Now, I doubt that the crew doesn't know how to do tequila shots. I think they probably would have already figured that out on their own.
Right. And she admits to them, I realize I've been very awful to you. So she's having some self-awareness of who she used to be, who she is now, and what she truly wants. And she's just sad because she knows that Grant doesn't love her. She feels betrayed by Dean. She knows she doesn't want to live maybe the life in the shack in Elk Cove.
Right.
But I don't think her life of luxury was fulfilling her as well.
So I just noticed that this is a film that had a strong influence on me, apparently, because the plot of basically a blonde woman who's holding on too tight, who has to learn to relax, and a brunette fellow who's a widower, who's a total mess and has to learn to get his act together, sounds a lot like a film we're going to review later in this month. Huh. Yeah, that's a thinker. I'm going to have to go have some thoughts about that.
Stay tuned. So as her and Grant are fighting, she discovers he kind of slips and makes it known that he knew she was in the psych ward and he left her there. And so now she's furious. And he also...
Rightfully furious, by the way.
And he confesses and says, there are many women who love me and who have had affairs with me. And she's kind of like, fine, then go be with them.
Now, here's where I did have a little bit of a confusion in the plot, because there's a point where he is commanding the captain of the boat. Mm-hmm. And then later we find out that it's actually her money. And her boat. And I didn't quite buy that. I kind of felt like the captain would know who the owner was and wouldn't respond to the owner's spouse over the owner.
Well, but at that time, everybody thought, oh, yeah, I don't know. That's a good that's a good
it's
point.
Interesting.
Yeah. Don't think about it too hard.
It's just a movie.
This is a movie.
Don't overthink it.
So we have this beautiful scene, and the story of Catarina and Arturo come back because Billy has a friend in the Coast Guard, and so Dean gets Billy to get this friend to take them all out to where the yacht is so that he can try to win her back. And this is about the time that she finds out that Grant has betrayed her, again. And so she turns the boat around. So at one point, they're going towards one another, and they're both so excited. But then the Coast Guard gets a call, and it takes priority, and so they have to turn. And she says, "Why are they leaving?" And she shouts out, "Arturo, Arturo!" And he jumps into the water because he knows that the Coast Guard will have to save him. And so they can't go away. And then she jumps in the water and he shouts back, "Catarina, Catarina." And so it's kind of like they're reliving the story that he told her. So they come together. The Coast Guard, or I guess somehow they all end up on the yacht, the four boys and him and her, and they're standing in front of the wheelhouse. Is that what you call it?
I think that's the right term, yeah.
that's when she tells him that it's all her money. Because I think he says, like, well, you don't want to come live our lifestyle. And she goes, yeah, but you don't understand. That's all my money. We get to live that way. And he says, and I think this is a true concern that a lot of, well, probably people, but men could have if the woman has most of the financial means. And he says, how could I ever give you anything that you couldn't just go buy? Or what could I give you?
Right.
And she says,
a little girl.
a little girl. She looks down at all the 4 boys and she says, a little girl.
That's sweet. So one of the reasons I think this is a stellar Oregon film is because of the role that the Coast Guard plays.
Yeah.
Because we have a large coast with a lot of fishing and water activities, and the Coast Guard is a big part of the state and our culture and everything. So it's good to see the Coast Guard getting some love because, to be honest, it's hard to find films where the Coast Guard isn't the kind of the butt of the joke, right? They're often played as kind of like, oh, well, they're not really the Navy. But in this case, I thought they were just characters like everyone else doing their thing.
And I forgot my very favorite line that to this day we will reference. It's become part of family lexicon. Is there's a seaman,